what I want to do in this video is tell you all about the different manual transmission options for these trucks and give you some information that could help you decide which transmission would be best for you, for your purposes and how you use your truck, as well as maybe your budget. A lot of this stuff you may know, but I would almost guarantee that some of the stuff I talk about you have no idea about. So stay tuned. Hopefully you like the video. Let's get into it. So matching up a manual transmission to a 12-valve Cummins is not a hard thing to do. The harder process is figuring out which transmission to go with. Now in this video, I'm really only going to be covering the manual transmissions that were ever offered by Dodge. We're not going to get into the Eatons and the ZF5 and the ZF6. We're going to stick to the Dodge offerings. One, because they're the most popular for these trucks, and budget-wise, it's the easiest way to go. So to start out with, the first manual transmission offered behind a 12-valve Cummins was the Getrag, the G360. This transmission was offered in first-gen Cummins from 1989 to 1993, but it was a popular transmission before that. It was used in many GM iterations prior to that, and they made some different changes to it to mate it behind the Cummins. Now, I'm sure you're aware that you hear polar opinions about the Getrag. Some people hate it and think it's a piece of garbage, and other people love it and swear by it. Me personally, I've never had any issues with them. I actually think it's a great transmission. They're fairly easy to find. They have decent aftermarket support and rebuild kits. They're cheap. They hold up to decent amounts of power, and as long as you know how to drive them, they hold up pretty well. The big issue with the Getrags are the synchros, and the way you ruin your synchros is lugging the transmission with heavy loads. So you have to know how to drive, especially when towing. But these transmissions do hold up to a lot, and there's a lot of people that prefer this transmission, the Getrag, over the next transmission we'll talk about, the NV4500. The NV4500 was offered behind the Cummins from 1994 to 2002. This, of course, is the years of the second-gen Cummins. Now, if you follow production numbers at all, you know that first-gen Cummins production numbers are much lower than second-gen Cummins production numbers. So, with those high production numbers, with a large range of years that it was available, the NV4500 is a very good transmission. It's very easy to find. It's very easy to find parts for. It's fairly inexpensive. I've never rebuilt one personally, but I've heard it's not the most difficult transmission to rebuild. They hold up to power pretty well, and most people love them. They do have one issue that's very common with them, and that's the fifth gear nut. Basically, if you're lugging the truck in fourth or fifth gear, hauling or under load, that fifth gear nut has a tendency to work itself off, back off, and then you lose fifth gear, you lose the transmission, it grenades. It's a problem. But the transmission's been around so long at this point, there's many companies out there that offer fixes for that fifth gear nut. So if you're planning on putting an NV4500 in your truck, or if you're gonna buy a truck with an NV4500, you need to ask the question, has the fifth gear nut been fixed? If it hasn't been fixed, you need to fix it before you throw it in your truck, or if you buy a truck with one in it, you need to fix it pretty early in that time period of owning the truck. Now, both of those transmissions are 5-speed options behind these 12-valve Cummins. They're both good transmissions in my opinion. Yours may differ, but I'm sure you're not watching this video to find out what 5-speed transmission to use. The big complaint among the consumers about these two 5-speed transmissions was the big gap between third and fourth gear, especially if you're hauling a load. So that's when Dodge started offering a 6-speed option. I know, there's only two 6-speed transmission options from Dodge, right? Wrong. I'm about to convince you that there are actually 4 iterations of the 6-speed manual transmissions from Dodge. So with that, let's start talking about the NV5600, the first 6-speed manual transmission offered by Dodge. The NV5600 was offered from 1999 to 2005, and if you know your trucks, you know that that spans some of the second-gen Cummins range up into the third-gen Cummins range. Now, when it was first released, it had a 1 1/8 inch input shaft. This became a problem very quickly with the torque of the Cummins. The consumer feedback was that this input shaft was not adequate for the torque of a Cummins. So they only offered that version with a 1 1/8 inch input shaft from 1999 to 2000, so 2 years. In 2001 to 2005, they started offering the NV5600 with a 1 3/8 inch input shaft. Now this version was much better, much more stout. It held up very well to the abuse. This is the version that everyone wants. So if you're looking for an NV5600, make sure to try and find the version with the 1 3/8 inch input shaft. Not only is it a stronger input shaft, but for that earlier model, because it wasn't very sought after, there's very little aftermarket support for it either. So parts are hard to find, people don't really use them or want to rebuild them, so they just don't have that demand. The other consistent feedback about the NV5600 was how stout it was. It weighed in at a whopping 360 pounds. And to give you some perspective, the NV4500 and the Getrag both weighed around 195 pounds. So 360 pounds, it was huge. It has a full cast steel housing, which is very stout and very robust, and it holds up to a lot of abuse. Now 2005 was kind of a cool year where they offered actually the NV5600 and the G56. Technically the G56 was a 2005.5 offering, but during that model year you could have either of those transmissions. Now the G56 started being offered in 2005.5, like I said, and was offered all the way until 2018. So it had a very long production cycle. This was a Mercedes-Benz product, and in my opinion, it's a great transmission as well. Now from 2005.5 to 2007, they also responded to some consumer feedback. When those models were in production, people were using them, the feedback was it was geared too low. Specifically, reverse was geared too low and overdrive was geared too low. So this model from 2005.5 to 2007 is known as the AD model. The AD model was geared lower for reverse and overdrive. And in 2007.5, they came out with the AE model, which is geared slightly higher in reverse and slightly higher in overdrive. Those are the only two differences between the AD and the AE model. So depending on what gear ratio you're running, whether you're towing more, whether you're commuting with it, whether you use it for a daily driver, that should be information that drives your decision behind which transmission you want. If you're towing a lot, that AD model with the lower gearing may work really well for you. Or for a first gen guy, if you've got 307 gears, the AD model would be perfect for you. But if you've got 410 gears and that AD model, you're going to be struggling to hit 65 miles per hour. Whereas with the AE model, that may be a good matchup for you. The biggest overall complaint with the G56 transmission was the aluminum casing that it was built out of. People complain that it's a weak point of the transmission. Now, I'm going to kind of try and change your mind on that a little bit. Yes, it's made of aluminum, so hence it'll be weaker than steel. What happens is if it's not built correctly or you're abusing it and putting too much power through it, the gears inside actually break. They shatter, and that's what explodes the case. So the case isn't the weak point, it's actually you're putting too much power through, or you don't have the transmission built for the power that you're putting through it. But if you have it built properly, the case is never an issue because all the internals can handle that power. So if you're running more than 550, 600 horsepower through your truck, the G56 is not going to hold up to that, especially in stock form. You need to get it built by a known builder. If you're running numbers north of that, the NV5600 with the larger input shaft is actually a really good option and is known to hold up to those numbers. Now, if you're trying to figure out what 6-speed transmission a truck has, if you come upon a truck and you can look inside of it, the main visual difference between the NV5600 and the G56 is the shift pattern. So in the NV5600, the reverse gear is in the very top right corner, and in the G56, the reverse gear is in the bottom left corner. So if you look at the knob, or if you can feel the shift pattern, that's how you can tell the difference between the two transmissions without crawling under the truck and trying to visually see which one it is. So now we get to the point where I tell you what transmission I chose and why. So I have always loved the G56 transmission. My dad bought a brand new 3500 dually in 2007 with a G56 in it, and ever since I drove that, I have loved the transmission. I think it shifts smoother than the NV5600 personally, but that's up for debate as well. So I knew I wanted a G56. I knew about the two different models, the AD and the AE. I have 354 gears in my truck. I haul with it occasionally, but really it's just kind of a daily fun driver. So I was fine with either model, but I really wanted the AE model because I wanted a better highway speed, better fuel mileage, and I knew even when I do tow, it's never more than 10,000 pounds, so it's not a big load anyways. That's when I set out to find one, and I did. I found an AE model that I'm going to be swapping into the truck in the next video through a series of videos. It will be awesome. There are very few first gens out there with G56s in there. There's some good write-ups on the forums that I've used to follow this process and learn how to do it. But this may be one of the very first video series on putting one in a first gen Cummins. I don't know, but it should be fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this information was valuable. If I misspoke on anything, or if there's anything else you know that maybe I don't know about the different manual transmissions, comment below. Let's help each other out and learn from this topic. I hope we can have a good discussion about it in the comments. Thanks for all your support on the channel, and we will see you guys in the next video.